When I pushed through the restaurant's glass door, Evelyn's hand was resting in Julian Mercer's palm. She wore the black dress I had taken from our closet for her that morning. The pearls at her ears were an anniversary gift from me. 2 glasses of red wine breathed between them beneath the low amber lights. Julian leaned closer and said something I could not hear. Evelyn lifted her face and laughed with the unguarded warmth of a woman remembering a life that existed before I did. It was our 10th wedding anniversary. Inside my coat pocket, my fingers closed around a ring box. I had taken her wedding band to be restored and engraved with the date again because the original numbers had worn thin. I did not walk over. The hostess recognized me from the reservation. Her smile widened, and she started to speak. I raised one hand. Please act like I was never here. My phone vibrated as I stepped back onto the sidewalk. A message from Evelyn appeared on the screen. Board meeting ran late. I'll be home after midnight. I stood beneath the restaurant awning while traffic hissed over wet pavement. For a long time, I watched the light glow in my hand. Then I typed one word. Okay. No anger came. No urge to storm back inside, drag out a chair, or demand that she explain herself in front of strangers. I simply understood something I had spent years refusing to understand. The woman I had been waiting for was not coming back. I left the ring and its velvet box in the glove compartment, and called Clara Whitmore from the parking garage. I need to understand legal separation and divorce. The line went quiet for a few seconds. Clara did not ask whether I was drunk, furious, or making a decision I would regret. We had known each other since college, and she had built her career in family law. Years earlier, I had helped her firm assess the risks of a major data migration. She knew I did not make irreversible decisions for the pleasure of making them. Go home, she said. Preserve your personal financial records. Don't drain joint accounts. Don't hide assets. Don't delete messages. And don't touch anything that isn't yours. I understand. I mean it, Adrian. Hurt people confuse self-protection with punishment. The court won't. At home, I did not open Evelyn's laptop. I did not search her purse, guess her passwords, or check the location history on the car. I logged into accounts I was legally authorized to access. I downloaded monthly statements from our joint checking and household credit accounts. I copied my insurance policies, retirement records, tax returns, employment agreements, and mortgage documents to an encrypted drive. After midnight, the garage door opened. Evelyn came in smelling faintly of cedar and expensive wine. Her steps were careful, almost soundless, as though she were trying not to wake the husband she expected to find asleep. I sat at the kitchen island with a mug of cold coffee between my hands. She stopped when she saw me. The meeting ran longer than expected. You didn't call again. You said you were busy. Her eyes stayed on my face, waiting for the questions I usually asked. Had she eaten? Did she need tea? Was tomorrow's first meeting still at 8? Had her mother's prescription been renewed? For years, concern had been the language I used to tell her I was still here. That night, I said nothing. Evelyn took off one pearl earring, then the other. Her movements sharpened. What is going on with you? I looked up. What were you hoping would be going on? A flicker crossed her expression. Guilt, perhaps, or irritation that I had made her feel it. I'm exhausted, Adrian. I'm not doing this tonight. Neither am I. I poured the coffee down the sink and went to the guest room. After I closed the door, I heard her remain in the kitchen for a long time. The next morning, I went to work as usual. Evelyn was president of Clearhaven Living Group, a regional company that managed long-term residential communities, home care coordination, and subscription-based repair services for middle-income families. Clearhaven operated across several jurisdictions and was preparing the largest development in its history, a mixed-use residential project known internally as Harbor Ridge. I led operational risk and compliance. Administratively, my department reported through the president's office. On procurement, audits, whistleblower matters, and material control failures, I reported directly to the board's audit committee. That structure had been adopted after outside investors came in. It was not designed to protect the company from Evelyn. It was designed to protect the company from any executive who might confuse authority with ownership. When Evelyn and I married, Clearhaven occupied one rented floor above a print shop. I never called myself a founder. I did not stand beside her during magazine profiles or correct people who assumed the company's systems had appeared fully formed. I built the vendor screening process, the incident reporting framework, the disaster response program, and the rules that separated customer trust funds from operating cash. No one applauded those systems when business was good. They were the reason the company could still function when something went wrong. At 10 that morning, Helen Brooks, deputy controller, brought a vendor exception request to my office. The proposed vendor was Gray Sparrow Advisory, a brand strategy firm. The contract would not bankrupt Clearhaven, but it was priced well above comparable engagements and had skipped competitive review. Evelyn had approved it. The proposed engagement lead was Julian Mercer. Helen lowered her voice. The president's office says it's an urgent strategic partnership. They want payment released today. I turned to the final page. The conflict of interest disclosure was blank. Who completed due diligence? No one yet. Then finance can't release funds. Helen shifted in her chair. Evelyn said the board is aware. Ask her office for written authorization from the board. I returned the file without mentioning the restaurant. A betrayal in my marriage was one issue. My duty to the company was another. If I delayed the contract out of jealousy, I would be abusing my role. If I approved a defective process because my wife wanted it, I would be participating in the defect. At noon, Evelyn came to my office herself. She shut the door and set the file on my desk. Why did you reject this? I didn't reject it. I returned it for missing due diligence, competitive support, and a conflict disclosure. Gray Sparrow can give Harbor Ridge access to community foundations and development partners we've been unable to reach. Then the value should be easy to document. Her jaw tightened. Is this punishment because I missed dinner last night? You weren't in a board meeting. The room went still. Color drained from her face and returned as anger. Were you following me? I went to the restaurant where we had a reservation. She folded her arms. Julian just came back to the city. We were discussing Harbor Ridge. He is also one of my oldest friends. Do you normally hold a consultant's hand while discussing procurement? Her silence lasted less than a second. But it was enough. He was emotional. Were you? Don't make this uglier than it is. The words landed with the weight of repetition. How many times had I made sure nothing became ugly? When she was working until dawn, I handled her mother's hospital admissions. When investors challenged her at board meetings, I sat across from her at midnight and rehearsed every hostile question. When she canceled vacations to chase another expansion, I refunded the tickets and told her there would be time later. As long as I absorbed the disappointment, nothing had to become ugly. I pushed the contract back toward her. Complete the required documentation. I'll review it through the normal process. And us? We can discuss that at home. She studied me as if I had begun speaking a language she did not recognize. That afternoon, Clara sent me a preliminary legal checklist. Our jurisdiction allowed no-fault divorce. An affair would not usually determine property division by itself. Concealed assets, misuse of marital funds, and violations of temporary financial duties could matter. I could not empty our joint account because I was wounded. I could open an individual account for future earnings, stop adding new discretionary household expenses, and serve formal notice of separation through counsel. I followed her advice. My future salary would go into a new account. I continued funding my share of the mortgage, taxes, insurance, utilities, and other established obligations. I did not cancel Evelyn's credit cards. I did not change the locks. The townhouse had been purchased during our marriage. It belonged to both of us unless a settlement or court order said otherwise. When I returned that evening, Evelyn was waiting in the living room. 2 glasses of wine sat on the coffee table. We need to talk. I took the chair opposite her. Instead of explaining the lie, she asked whether I intended to sabotage Gray Sparrow. I intend to require the same review we require from every other vendor. That review takes weeks. Because you brought the contract in at the last minute. A crease formed between her eyebrows. Julian can put us in rooms we've spent years trying to enter. Through what specific relationships? Brand networks, community foundations, real estate advisors. All of that can be verified. You don't trust me. I don't trust undocumented promises. You never used to talk to me like this. I used to believe we were on the same side. She tightened her grip on the stem of her glass. What happened with Julian isn't what you think. Then what was it? She looked at the wine but did not drink. I owed him an answer. Years ago, she said, she and Julian had loved each other. Family expectations, school, and career choices had pulled them apart. He left the region. She stayed, built Clearhaven, and eventually married me. Now he was back, and she had realized she had never properly said goodbye to the life she might have had. I needed to know who I would be if I hadn't let him go. I listened without interrupting. You used our anniversary to find out? Her face lost its color. I forgot the date. That answer was cleaner than any excuse. She had not been too busy to remember. She had given the entire evening to another man and forgotten what it belonged to. I nodded once. All right. She reached across the space between us. Adrian, I'm not leaving you. I moved before her hand could touch mine. You just wanted to know how far you could go while I stayed where you left me. Her fingers remained suspended in the air. I need time. You have it. What does that mean? It means I need time too. I need to decide whether there is anything left here worth preserving. That night, I moved into the guest room. For the next several days, Evelyn behaved as if the disruption could be outlasted. She left dry cleaning by the front door. She forwarded her mother's prescription notice to me. She continued arriving late and placing household problems in my path without comment, as though my hands would rise automatically to catch them. I sent the prescription notice back. Please contact the pharmacy, or ask Margaret to authorize her care coordinator. Her reply came nearly an hour later. You know I'm in meetings all day. So am I. The next afternoon, the pharmacy called the house. The refill required confirmation from Margaret's physician. In the past, I would have coordinated the office, insurer, and pharmacy before Evelyn knew there was a delay. This time, she left a meeting and spent half an hour handling it herself. When she came home, she dropped her bag hard enough to rattle the entry table. Did you have to drag my mother into this? She wasn't dragged into anything. You know she depends on you. She depends on someone doing the work you keep assigning away. Her eyes reddened. After everything between us, you can't even do this one thing? I sent you every contact and every step. That's not the same. No, it isn't. Having someone do the work for you was never the same as being responsible for it yourself. Gray Sparrow eventually submitted additional materials. Julian's supposed foundation access turned out not to be contractual access at all. It consisted of several vague introduction emails from people who had not promised meetings, funding, or support. More troubling was the success fee provision. Gray Sparrow would receive a large payment if the engagement was deemed successful, but the contract allowed Evelyn alone to decide whether sufficient commercial value had been created. She could sign a letter, and the fee would become payable even if Harbor Ridge never secured a partner, a grant, or a single additional tenant. I issued a written risk opinion. My recommendation was straightforward. Replace the subjective success fee with fixed payments tied to defined stages, and require an independent business leader to approve completed work. Evelyn refused. At the executive meeting, she said opportunities did not wait for bureaucratic comfort. I did not argue. I asked that my objection and the missing controls be included in the minutes. It was one of the most routine actions in my job. Her expression changed as though I had publicly accused her of theft. After the meeting, she summoned me to her office. Did you have to oppose me in front of everyone? I did my job in a business meeting. You could have warned me privately. I did. So now you're creating a record in case something goes wrong. Records exist to show who decided what. She walked to the window and turned her back to me. Julian is right about you. You've never understood risk. I watched her reflection in the glass. That's because every time you take one, I'm the person who builds the net. She turned sharply. You think I'm incapable without you? I didn't say that. You never have to. It's in every sentence. I left without trying to convince her otherwise. Our marriage had not begun with sacrifice. In the early years, we took turns cooking and picking up laundry. We argued over forgotten milk, laughed while assembling discount furniture, and spent Saturdays painting the first Clearhaven office because we could not afford contractors. Then the company secured institutional funding. Evelyn's time stopped belonging to her. She traveled constantly. Board members called after midnight. Every cancelled plan became the price of a critical opportunity. I understood. My own role was more predictable, so I volunteered to take on more at home. I told myself the imbalance was temporary. Temporary became normal. Bills, insurance renewals, repairs, holiday gifts, family visits, medical paperwork, and social obligations slowly moved into my hands. Evelyn did thank me. Some nights she would hold me in the dark and say she could not have survived without me. By morning, another responsibility would appear on the kitchen counter. A thank you had become the full price she believed the work required. I had once been offered a senior position at a regional insurance organization. The job came with better pay, authority over a multi-jurisdictional risk system, and the chance to build my own team. Clearhaven was preparing to enter a second market at the time. Evelyn never ordered me to stay. She simply stopped sleeping. For several nights, She sat at the dining table calculating worst-case scenarios, and telling me no one inside the company could maintain the compliance architecture if I left. I declined the offer. She cried with relief and promised she would remember what I had done for the rest of her life. I believed her. Looking back, I think she did remember. Remembering a sacrifice and valuing it enough to change your own choices are not the same thing. I did not include any of that history in Clara's legal file. Old disappointments were not financial evidence. They did not entitle me to more property, but they explained why a single dinner had broken something 10 years of strain had failed to break. It was not because Julian was more exciting. It was not because Evelyn had wondered about an old love. It was because she had once again assumed I would understand what she needed without asking her to understand what it cost me. People who live on invisible labor long enough begin to experience boundaries as cruelty. 1 week after the anniversary, a process server delivered Evelyn formal notice of separation. The notice did not end the marriage. It established the date, preserved financial expectations, and set temporary rules for household expenses, use of the home, and communication through counsel. She came into my study holding the envelope. This is real? Yes. Over one dinner? No. Then what else? I handed her a single sheet of paper. There were no accusations on it, only dates and events. She had cancelled our marriage counseling appointments. She had converted a shared vacation into a business trip. For months, she had used company staff to arrange Julian's personal transportation and hospitality. She had delayed a family estate planning meeting but spent an afternoon helping Julian tour office space. She had lied about the restaurant. She had left the conflict disclosure blank. Each fact could be explained on its own. Together, they formed a pattern of choices. Evelyn read the page, crushed it in her fist, and looked at me as if I had betrayed her. You've been keeping score. I was making sure I hadn't misunderstood. You never trusted me. Not after the restaurant. Her breathing quickened. I'm not signing a divorce agreement. There isn't one yet. I won't agree to sell this house. Then attorneys and an appraiser can address it. My calmness seemed to hurt her more than shouting would have. Are you not even sad? I looked at the paper twisted in her hand. Being sad is not a reason to keep maintaining the life that made me sad. She slammed the door when she left. The next evening, she invited 2 of our closest friends to the house. Marcus Hale was Clearhaven's head of human resources and had known both of us for years. Helen came as well, visibly uncomfortable the moment she realized this was not a social dinner. Evelyn said I had brought private jealousy into the company, and was deliberately obstructing Harbor Ridge. Marcus did not take a side. Did you complete the conflict disclosure? He asked. Julian is an old friend. That does not create a reportable conflict. I took the policy manual from my briefcase and opened it to the relevant provision. Any intimate relationship, former romantic relationship, or significant personal interest that could reasonably affect business judgment had to be disclosed to the audit committee. Evelyn stared at the page. You brought company policy into our home so you could put me on trial? Marcus asked a company question. Marcus rubbed his forehead. This discussion should not be happening here. External counsel needs to decide whether disclosure was required. Evelyn turned toward me. Are you satisfied now? This is not what I wanted. You're creating it. I'm just not covering it anymore. After that night, our friends began avoiding us. Invitations stopped. One person texted that marital problems should not threaten employees' jobs. Another suggested that successful women often paid a price when their husbands became insecure. I did not defend myself to each of them. Without documents, explanations become campaigns for sympathy. I kept company communications inside company systems. I kept marital communications between attorneys. The consequences reached me quickly. Evelyn froze my unvested long-term incentive award on the ground that I might voluntarily leave the company. The plan allowed her to do it. The award would have covered several years of my share of the mortgage. I did not describe myself as helpless. Leaving had a cost, and I had chosen to leave. I cancelled an order for a replacement car, resigned from a private club, and began looking at modest apartments closer to the office. Clara warned me not to move out of the townhouse until we had an interim agreement, or court order. Voluntary departure could complicate practical possession, access to records, and property management, so I remained in the guest room. Evelyn began staying out later. Photographs from industry events appeared online, showing her and Julian standing beside each other at receptions. Their posture was more intimate than most business partners, but I did not save the images as proof of an affair. A public photograph proved they had attended the same event. It did not prove what happened after the camera turned away. The company's expense records mattered more. Under our controls, executive expenses were sampled for review. Several dinners, hotel meeting rooms, and car service charges had been coded to Harbor Ridge. One restaurant receipt was dated on our anniversary. Party size. 2. Business purpose. Board preparation. No board meeting had taken place that day. I did not print the record and carry it home. I opened an exception review inside Clearhaven's financial system and asked finance to preserve the supporting documents. Helen locked the records under the standard retention process. The audit trail captured who uploaded the receipt, who approved it, and whether anyone later attempted to change it. The receipt did not prove Evelyn had broken her vows. It proved that a private dinner had been submitted with a false business description. The amount was small. Integrity does not become irrelevant because the invoice is affordable. Evelyn received the review notice and intercepted me in the parking garage. You're investigating one dinner now? I'm reviewing a false expense description. We did discuss the project. Then why does the receipt say board preparation? My assistant entered it incorrectly. Ask your assistant to submit a correction. Her mouth tightened. You know what kind of record that creates. That is why the record needs to be accurate. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. Are you really going to put me in front of the board over this? You submitted the expense to the company. For the first time, I saw fear beneath her anger. I wanted one night where I wasn't the president, Margaret's daughter, or your wife. You are allowed to have a night that belongs to you. You would have been disappointed. So you lied. She looked away. A few days later, outside counsel recommended that the audit committee begin a limited review. The scope covered Gray Sparrow's procurement, executive expenses connected to the engagement, the firm's claimed resources, and Evelyn's disclosure obligations. Grant Whitlock, the board chair, asked to speak with me privately. Can you remain objective while this is reviewed? I've asked to be removed from any judgment about the personal nature of Evelyn's relationship. I will provide policies, process history, and documents only. Are you planning to leave Clearhaven? Yes. He removed his glasses and placed them on the conference table. If you go now, there will be a substantial control gap. Then our succession plan failed. No one understands the framework the way you do. If the framework depends on me forever. It is not a framework. Grant sat back. The board ultimately approved a one-quarter transition. An outside firm would conduct the review. I would retain salary and vested benefits through the handover. Unvested incentives would be treated under the existing plan. It was not a victory. I lost money I had counted on. I also lost the professional identity that had defined most of my adult life. When I told Evelyn, she dropped the pen in her hand. You can't leave. I've reached an arrangement with the board. We are in the middle of the largest expansion in company history. That is why I'm completing a transition. Who gave you the right to make this decision alone? My career belongs to me. She rose from the sofa, pale with anger. You're punishing me. I'm separating my work from our marriage. The audit will make it look like I forced out the person who challenged me. The board knows I resigned. Julian will become the entire issue. That depends on his contract and the records. She caught my wrist. You know what Harbor Ridge means to me. I looked down at her hand. You knew what that night meant to me. Her grip loosened. That evening, she stood outside the guest room door for a long time. She never knocked. I never opened it. The review lasted for weeks. Julian did not wait passively for the findings. Gray Sparrow submitted a revised statement of work that reclassified its early promises as exploratory services. He asked the Harbor Ridge team to relabel several ordinary introductory meetings as critical partner engagements. The project manager refused to alter the original purpose of the meetings. She agreed to add accurate notes describing what had occurred, but she would not rewrite history to improve a vendor's performance record. Her email became part of the review. It mattered not because she had made a dramatic accusation, but because Clearhaven's document system preserved versions, approvals, and reasons for material changes. A quiet refusal inside a controlled system often carried more weight than an emotional allegation outside one. Julian also claimed the success fee schedule had been a negotiation draft and was never meant to become binding. Procurement had Evelyn's electronic approval authorizing payment preparation. Finance had her email instructing the team to reserve the fee in the project budget. No single document proved she intended to transfer money improperly. Together, they showed that she had placed a highly subjective payment decision in her own hands while dealing with a man whose past relationship with her had not been disclosed. Once Evelyn realized the relationship itself could no longer be minimized, She changed her position. She acknowledged that she and Julian had dated years earlier. She emphasized that the relationship had ended long ago, and that she received no direct financial benefit from Gray Sparrow's contract. That explanation was closer to the truth. It also shifted the question from whether she had concealed a past relationship to why she believed it required no disclosure. Outside counsel asked whether she had consulted anyone. She said she had mentioned it to me verbally. I said she had not. Rather than reduce the matter to a dispute between spouses, the investigators reviewed my calendar, notes, and compliance logs. I had a habit of documenting material procurement consultations because risk guidance was often reused in later projects. There was no entry for Gray Sparrow or Julian. Evelyn could produce no email, calendar invitation, message, or memorandum showing that she had asked. Eventually, she conceded that she may only have thought about asking me. It was not a sudden confession. It was what happened when a vague memory was required to stand beside verifiable records. The investigation report did not call her a liar. It stated that management's assertion lacked contemporaneous support. In a boardroom, that sentence was heavier than outrage. Directors did not need to decide who sounded more sincere. They needed to know which facts another person could independently confirm. Gray Sparrow's list of claimed resources also weakened under review. Several community foundations the firm said it could influence offered only public application channels. Potential partners described as committed admitted they had attended one introductory call and made no promise. The most serious issue remained the success fee attachment. The earliest version required signed agreements and funded commitments before a fee could be earned. A later version allowed payment whenever Evelyn confirmed in writing that Gray Sparrow had created commercial value. The system showed that the change had been uploaded the day after the anniversary dinner. The uploader was Gray Sparrow's project manager. The approver was Evelyn. She argued that rigid metrics could discourage innovative work. That was not a ridiculous business position. The governance failure was that she had neither disclosed the change to legal and procurement, nor revealed her prior relationship with the person who would benefit from it. While the review continued, Harbor Ridge developed actual operational problems. Julian's publicity campaign attracted coverage but did not produce enough qualified pre-lease customers. An engineering partner paused early work because payment milestones were unclear. A local community commission requested additional traffic and care capacity analysis before supporting the next approval stage. None of those problems was fatal. In the past, I would have organized them before Evelyn entered the room. Regulatory risk in one column, cash exposure in another, public reaction, insurance, and schedule dependencies ranked by severity. The outside consultants taking over from me needed time to learn Clearhaven's systems. The project slipped by several weeks. Evelyn blamed the delay on my resignation. At a board meeting, Grant reminded her that management was responsible for succession. The company could not build its controls around the expectation that one employee would continue sacrificing indefinitely. She did not answer. That night, she returned home and found only her clothes in the laundry room. For years, I had sorted her garments by fabric, arranged dry cleaning, and hung the next morning's suit where she could reach it before dawn. Now I handled my own things and left hers untouched. She found me in the hallway. Are you really cutting off every habit we built in 10 years? A habit isn't an obligation. You used to say taking care of me made you happy. It did when I believed you valued it. I did value it. You just never imagined it could stop. Tears gathered in her eyes. She blinked them back. Julian says this is how you control me. Then you're free. I don't want this kind of freedom. This is the boundary you chose. She had no answer. A few days later, Margaret fell at home. She did not break a bone, but she needed short-term rehabilitation and a home safety assessment. The hospital called the emergency contact on file. That number was still mine. I confirmed she was stable and then contacted Evelyn. I did not sign treatment or placement documents. I was not Margaret's legal healthcare agent and had no authority to choose a facility for her. When Evelyn arrived at the hospital, she looked at me with exhausted accusation. Why didn't you arrange the rehabilitation center? Margaret or her authorized agent has to choose. You always screen the options first. I sent you the facilities in her insurance network. I have an investor presentation today. You can reschedule it. Or Margaret can appoint someone else. She trusts you. From the hospital bed, Margaret turned her head. It isn't that I only trust Adrian, she said slowly. He's the only one who remembered. Evelyn went still. I poured Margaret a cup of water. But I did not take over. With help from the hospital social worker, Evelyn and her mother selected a rehabilitation provider. Evelyn missed half of the investor presentation. The investors did not pull their money. They requested a written update on management stability. The consequence was real. But no thunderbolt destroyed her career. Most lives do not collapse with an explosion. They become harder one unattended responsibility at a time. Julian grew more impatient. He pressed Evelyn to approve the success fee, claiming Gray Sparrow needed liquidity. The review found the firm was not insolvent, but it had recently lost 2 long-term clients. His return to Evelyn had involved unfinished emotion and practical interest. That did not make every feeling false. It only meant feeling and advantage had never existed in separate rooms. Evelyn defended him more aggressively. Every consultant wanted a contract, she said. A former romance did not prove favoritism. The board was placing a woman president's private life under a microscope. Some of that criticism was fair. The board stated repeatedly that it was not judging whom she loved. It was reviewing disclosure, procurement controls, expense accuracy, and independent decision-making. Evelyn kept merging the 2 questions. As long as she called governance review a personal humiliation, she did not have to admit that she had crossed a professional line. After completing the first stage of my transition, I began working several days a week from a shared office in Northbridge, a northern district on the other side of the city. Marcus introduced me to a member-owned insurance cooperative that needed to redesign incident response for its network of home service contractors. The engagement was smaller than my role at Clearhaven. The fee was lower. I accepted it because I needed work that did not share a wall with my marriage. In the evenings, I cooked for one. I measured furniture in apartment model units. I compared transit routes and storage space. I had not moved yet, but I was preparing for a life that did not require joint approval. The ordinary decisions exhausted me. They also made me feel awake. For a decade, I had designed 2 people's lives as one operating system. Now the most important question in my evening could be which wall should hold the bed. Evelyn learned that I had signed a lease through our required financial disclosures. She came home holding the copy. You already found an apartment? It's available next month. Why didn't you tell me? Your attorney received the disclosure. I'm your wife, not opposing counsel. Right now, you are both. She sat on the sofa and rubbed the corner of the paper between her fingers until it curled. I thought you were trying to make me apologize. I wanted an apology once. Then I'm sorry. For what? For seeing Julian on our anniversary. What else? For lying about the meeting. What else? Her breath became unsteady. Do you need me to say I'm a terrible person? I need to know what you understand. Silence stretched between us. At last, she said, I don't want to lose my marriage. That was fear. It was not understanding. I placed the lease back in the file. We should go to mediation. Her head snapped up. You've decided? Yes. I haven't chosen Julian. This is not a multiple choice question waiting for your answer. You can't leave while I'm still trying to understand what I want. You are allowed to hesitate. I am allowed to stop waiting. Her tears came then. I did not cross the room to wipe them away. I did not hate her. But if I carried her through that moment, she would treat my comfort as evidence that the marriage could still be restored. Before mediation, we exchanged complete financial disclosures. We had no children. The major issues were the townhouse equity, retirement accounts, vested company interests, and allocation of ongoing household expenses. Evelyn initially wanted to keep the house because it was close to headquarters and convenient for Margaret. I agreed that she could have the first opportunity to buy out my share, provided an independent appraiser set the value and she refinanced within a fixed period. Her attorney tried to include my cancelled, unvested incentive award in the marital estate. Clara pointed out that the award had no distributable value because it had already been forfeited under the plan. I did not pursue most of the Clearhaven shares Evelyn had owned before our marriage. I claimed only the portion of marital appreciation available under local law. That did not make the process kind. It kept it from becoming endless punishment. Across the mediation table, Evelyn watched me sign an appraisal authorization. You won't even fight. I'm fighting for what is legally mine. I mean for us. A marriage cannot be repaired through a property negotiation. Her lawyer reminded her that the session was for financial issues. Evelyn pushed back her chair. Everyone only wants to talk about numbers. Clara's voice remained calm. Because this is a financial mediation. Evelyn walked to the end of the hallway and remained there for several minutes. When she returned, she agreed to the appraisal and to temporary separation of discretionary expenses. It was the first time we signed a document acknowledging that our daily lives were no longer shared. The company review reached its conclusion at roughly the same time. Outside counsel found no evidence that Evelyn had stolen a large amount of money or received a direct kickback from Julian. Her failures were serious but not criminal. She had not disclosed a material personal relationship. She had bypassed procurement controls, approved an inaccurate expense description, and failed to exercise independent judgment over a subjective success fee provision. The board did not destroy the company to make a point. It did not have security escort her from the building or issue a dramatic statement to the press. Instead, it suspended her authority to approve major vendors, removed her sole decision-making power over Harbor Ridge, and required governance training and executive oversight. Gray Sparrow's contract was terminated. Completed work would be valued by an independent reviewer and paid at a reasonable fixed amount. Julian would not receive the success fee he had expected. His response arrived through counsel. The letter claimed that Gray Sparrow's business representations had relied on information provided by the president's office and that every material contract change had been approved by Evelyn. She brought the letter home and placed it in front of me. "He's putting everything on me. Give it to Clearhaven's attorneys. You knew he would do this." "No, you never trusted him." "I did not trust promises that could not be verified." She pressed her fingers to her forehead. "I thought he came back because he finally understood how much I mattered. Maybe part of him did. Why are you defending him? Understanding someone's motive is not the same as excusing the result." Her eyes lifted to mine. She looked older than she had a month before. "And you? What about me? Are you leaving because I fell in love with someone else? Or because I stopped needing you?" I considered the question. "I'm leaving because you treated me like infrastructure that could never fail." Her lips parted, but no words came. "You needed me to organize your life," I continued. "You needed me to catch problems before board meetings. You needed me to make decisions when your mother was sick. You needed Julian to make you feel young enough to be chosen without cost. You believed both needs could be met at the same time, and that I would accept it because I was the reasonable one." Evelyn closed her eyes. I was wrong. For once, she did not immediately add a qualification. I thought she might finally be ready to face the full shape of what she had done. The next morning, she filed a complaint with the audit committee. She asked the board to investigate whether I had used our marriage to obtain her private information and whether I had weaponized Clearhaven's compliance process to strengthen my position in the divorce. It was not stupidity. Her authority, reputation, and sense of control were all slipping away. She reached for the only argument that might place some of that scrutiny on me. The committee had to take the allegation seriously. I was suspended from access to the relevant files and interviewed by an independent investigator. I surrendered my work devices and authorized review of access logs, assigned workflows, and document downloads. The interruption ended my final weeks of normal transition work. The insurance cooperative also paused my consulting engagement. Its leaders were concerned about potential misuse of confidential information. That was the greatest professional cost I paid. I had no proof that Evelyn's complaint was knowingly false. She had the right to question my conduct. All I could do was cooperate. For nearly 2 weeks, I had almost no income. I moved into the apartment before it was fully furnished. My mattress lay directly on the bedroom floor. The heating pipes clicked at night, and sometimes I woke expecting to see the guest room door of the townhouse. For the first time since the restaurant, I was afraid. Not of losing Evelyn. I was afraid that the professional reputation I had spent years building would be buried beneath the wreckage of our marriage. On my first weekend in the apartment, I returned to the townhouse for the last of my personal belongings. Evelyn had separated my books and records. The boxes were labeled by room and category in the same neat block letters I used when we moved. There was no comfort in seeing her imitate my system. She had finally begun doing the work I once did, but only after I had decided to leave. She carried a box of photo albums into the garage. "Who gets these? We can scan them and keep copies. And the originals? You can have them." She opened the top album. The first page held a photograph from Clearhaven's original office. Evelyn stood in the empty conference room with a paint roller. I was behind her, holding a ladder steady. We had no administrative staff then, no brand advisor. The paint had come from a clearance shelf. "I wasn't always like this," she said. "People change." "When did you become unhappy?" "There wasn't one day." "Then why didn't you tell me?" "I told you I was tired. I asked you to attend the estate planning meetings. I suggested marriage counseling. I thought it was stress. You treated every kind of pain that didn't interfere with work as something we could postpone. She closed the album. I can change. I believe you can. Hope appeared in her expression so quickly that I almost wished I had chosen different words. But I don't need to stay and supervise the change. The hope vanished. She did not stop me from loading the boxes. Before I left, she asked whether she could keep the turntable we had bought together. I said yes. It was not especially valuable, but too many memories lived around it. She said she would include it in the property inventory. That isn't necessary. Giving something up did not mean she had one. I simply did not want the past taking up space in my new home. Clara handled all outside communication. Marcus obtained my authorization history from Human Resources and Information Security. The logs showed that I had accessed the disputed expenses and vendor files only after finance assigned them to my review queue or the audit workflow triggered access. I had not learned about the anniversary dinner through company records. I had gone to the restaurant because the table had originally been reserved for Evelyn and me. The reservation system still showed my two-person booking and the cancellation entered when I arrived alone. The restaurant kept those records for routine billing and customer service. Through a formal request, Clara obtained a confirmation letter. It did not prove what Evelyn and Julian had done. It proved that I had not followed her, searched corporate expenses to locate her, or manufactured the conflict after seeing confidential documents. More important, the divorce disclosures contained no confidential Clearhaven material. The financial records I used came from joint household accounts, public compensation information, and documents produced through counsel. The independent investigation found no evidence that I had misused company access. Grant called me to his office. You can complete your handover. Will the report remain in the record? Yes. Then that's enough. He studied me. You don't want a broader statement clearing you? The accusation was internal. The correction can remain internal. I did not need Evelyn humiliated in front of every employee. I needed my professional file to be accurate. The insurance cooperative restored the project, but shortened the contract and added stricter confidentiality provisions. I accepted. Once trust has been touched by a dispute, even an unfounded one, rebuilding it takes time. Evelyn came to my apartment after learning the result. It was the first time she had seen the life I was building without her. The living room held a folding table, 2 chairs, and several unopened boxes. A small lamp stood on the floor because I had not yet bought a side table. She remained near the doorway. You actually live here. For now. The house has your office, the kitchen you designed, the turntable we chose together. You're keeping the house. I'm not talking about the house. I gave her a glass of water and did not invite her farther inside. Her fingers trembled around the glass. I withdrew my concern. The investigation was already complete. At the time, it felt like everyone had taken your side. They were looking at records. I know. Why are you here? Her eyes were bloodshot when she looked up. Julian is leaving. I waited. After Gray Sparrow's contract ended, Julian had decided to pursue clients in another city. He asked Evelyn to go with him. He said they could begin again somewhere no one knew the details of the review. Evelyn asked whether he would stay if she no longer controlled the project, no longer had Clearhaven Resources behind her, and no longer carried the authority of the president's office. He did not give her a clear answer. He said he loved me, not my position. She whispered. Then he said adults can't build a life on love alone. He isn't wrong about that. She stared at me. Why can you always find a reason for everyone? Because I don't need him to be evil in order to leave you. A tear dropped into her water. What does that make me? Not evil. But you still don't want me. No. She covered her mouth. Her shoulders moved with small, controlled breaths. I stayed in my chair. After several minutes, she lowered her hands. I thought that as long as I never truly started a life with him, you had no right to end ours. I know. I thought you would wait until I figured it out. I know. Why didn't you come inside the restaurant that night? It was the first time she had asked. I looked toward the unfamiliar lights beyond the window. Because I already had the answer when I saw you. If I confronted you, you would have explained. If I became angry, you would have called me irrational. If I tried to stop you, you would have told yourself the marriage was trapping you. I didn't want to perform that scene for you. Her face seemed to lose its structure. So you did nothing. I left. She shook her head. After you left, everything broke. I didn't break it, but you always fixed it. The words stopped her. She heard the truth inside them at the same moment I did. What frightened her was not that I had taken revenge. It was that the person who had repaired every leak in her life had finally stopped reaching for the tools. Before she left, she placed an old key on the folding table. The spare key to the townhouse. I'll complete the buyout under the agreement. All right. Margaret keeps asking when you'll visit, when her rehabilitation is stable. I will. Not for me? No. She nodded and went to the door. Adrian, is there anything I can do? Take responsibility for what belongs to you. She waited for another answer. I did not give her one. Refinancing the townhouse took several months. Interest rates had risen, and the new monthly payment placed real pressure on Evelyn's finances. To complete the buyout, she sold several non-core investments. That was not punishment. It was the cost of choosing to keep the house. My share paid the apartment deposit, legal fees, and the remaining expenses from the separation. I placed what was left in a conservative account. I did not buy a luxury home. I did not wake up rich. I simply gained a financial foundation that did not require anyone else's permission. Clearhaven did not cancel Harbor Ridge. The board reduced its size, reopened the brand consulting bid, and delayed the launch. Evelyn remained president, but a newly appointed chief operating officer shared authority over major project decisions. She lost some independence. She also lost the easy confidence of several executives. Others respected that she stayed and worked through the corrective plan. Reality did not erase her. It required her to live inside the consequences of her choices. The board did not immediately announce the details of her discipline to the entire workforce. Only people directly involved in Harbor Ridge knew that approval authority had changed. The limited disclosure prevented unnecessary panic, but it created rumors. Some employees said Evelyn would be fired. Others claimed I was organizing investors to take control of Clearhaven. One rumor insisted Julian had been planted by the board to test her. None of it was true. Marcus recommended a narrow internal statement confirming that Harbor Ridge's governance structure had been revised. It would not discuss private relationships. Evelyn initially objected. She feared silence would make employees assume she had committed something worse. Grant told her that publicly explaining her personal history would damage the company and turn Julian into a spectacle. In the end, she agreed. It was the first time I saw her accept that she could not control every misunderstanding by controlling the story. The statement did not restore business overnight. Several partners demanded new signature confirmations. A lender raised Harbor Ridge's risk classification and required additional reserves. Clearhaven could absorb the requirement, but it postponed a smaller expansion elsewhere. The team responsible for that project was furious. They did not blame Evelyn for every problem. They did not treat me as a hero. They knew only that their bonuses, hiring plans, and promotions had been delayed by a decision made far above them. That was how management failures spread. The executive at the center lost reputation. People at the edge lost time and opportunity. I listed those secondary effects in my transition report, not to increase Evelyn's punishment, to teach the next risk leader that governance failures did not remain inside meeting minutes. Evelyn began attending compliance training personally. She handled Margaret's medical bills, answered family correspondence, and scheduled household repairs that I once arranged. Sometimes, late at night, she sent me a photograph, an insurance explanation she had finally understood. A pot of soup burned to the bottom, a repair ticket after a pipe began leaking beneath the kitchen sink. She did not ask me to solve the problem. I replied only when something required a factual answer. Our relationship changed from intimate to courteous. That was more final than anger. The insurance cooperative engagement stabilized. Through Marcus, I reconnected with Lydia Shaw, a former risk manager who had moved into client development. We formed a small advisory practice together. Lydia found clients. I designed systems. There was no dramatic financing round and no polished downtown headquarters. We began with 2 recurring clients and a conference room rented by the month. Starting over did not cure me of old habits. During our first major assignment, I agreed to deliver a complete vendor audit framework on an impossible schedule because I wanted to prove I could carry the project alone. The team worked late for days. At a planning meeting, Lydia closed her laptop. Are you doing it again? Doing what? Making yourself responsible for every problem in the room. The question stopped me. I had believed leaving Evelyn meant leaving the pattern. Habits do not disappear because the address changes. I still treated reliability as proof of worth. I still confused exhaustion with competence. I still felt safest when other people depended on me. I apologized to the team, renegotiated the deadline, and assigned part of the review to an outside specialist. The client was unhappy but accepted the revised plan. We earned less. The loss taught me that boundaries were not only about refusing other people. They were also about admitting I was not the only person capable of fixing things. Evelyn occasionally asked about the firm. I told her we were learning. She did not mock the smaller office or compare my new work to my old title. Once, she said, I'm beginning to understand that lasting is harder than looking powerful. I had waited years to hear something like that. Late understanding could still be honest. It simply no longer had the right to change the ending. It took 6 months for my income to reach roughly half of what I had earned at Clearhaven. Every contract, however, was one I had chosen. Every late night belonged to a commitment I had made for myself. Not a mistake I was concealing for someone else. The freedom was not glamorous. It was steady. One issue in the divorce proved more difficult than the house. Evelyn and I had purchased long-term care coverage together. We had also named each other as healthcare agents. Clara warned me that divorce would not automatically update every authorization unless we filed changes. An emergency could still make my former spouse the first person contacted and the person empowered to make decisions. I named a new agent and sent the documents to my physician, insurer, and attorney. The system notification reached Evelyn. She called me. You removed me from your medical authorization. Yes. If something happens to you, I won't have any say. We're getting divorced. The line went silent. I always thought at least that position would never change. A place in someone's life does not become permanent just because it was once important. She did not argue. The next day, she updated her own directives. Margaret and a professional fiduciary became her agents. The change never appeared in our property agreement. It did not affect the company review. Yet it marked the separation more clearly than many signed pages. We were no longer the people the world would automatically call first. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for early winter. Most issues had been resolved. The judge needed to confirm financial disclosure, voluntary consent, and the terms of the settlement. Evelyn wore a dark gray suit. No assistant stood beside her with a prepared binder. She checked each page herself. The judge asked whether we understood that the marriage would be dissolved. I understand, I said. Evelyn paused. I understand. The judge asked whether either of us had been coerced. We both said no. The hearing ended without a declaration of fault. No one read our private failures into the record. No amount of regret altered the legal conclusion. Fine rain had begun when we stepped out of the courthouse. Adrian. I turned. This is the month we first met, she said. I remember. A small, bitter smile touched her mouth. You remember everything. Remembering doesn't require returning. She reached into her bag and brought out a velvet ring box. Inside was the ring I had left in the glove compartment on our anniversary. I did not know when she had found it. Perhaps when the shared car was valued and transferred. You were going to give me this that night? Yes. Why didn't you take it later? I forgot. Her eyes moved from the ring to my face. You forget things too. I do. Does that mean one day you'll forget me? I would not give her a cruel answer simply because I could. I hope one day either of us is defined by this marriage. She closed the box. I don't want it to define me. I'm just afraid it will become meaningless. It mattered. Her fingers tightened around the velvet. It taught me that love is not a service that renews automatically. She looked up. That wasn't in any governance course. I nodded. Take care of yourself, Evelyn. Her fingers caught the sleeve of my coat. The pressure was light, as though she knew she no longer had the right to hold tighter. Give me one more chance. I gave you many. I didn't understand then. Understanding now is the beginning of your next life. It isn't a reason to restart ours. Her hand fell. I walked down the courthouse steps without looking back. There was no scream behind me, no collapse. Only a woman standing in the rain, finally unable to avoid the cost of what she had chosen. A few months later, I visited Margaret at the rehabilitation center. She could walk without assistance again, though she still attended physical therapy twice a week. She did not ask me to take Evelyn back. Instead, she handed me an old cardboard file box. Inside were copies of insurance cards, medication lists, physician contacts, and emergency instructions I had maintained for years. Evelyn does this now, Margaret said. That's good. She's slow. She makes mistakes. Everyone does when they're learning. Margaret sighed. When she was a girl, she was terrified of failure. She always wanted the most dependable person standing beside her. I stood there too long. Yes. She did not soften the answer. In the parking lot, I saw Evelyn carrying a bag of groceries. The wind had loosened her hair. There was no assistant beside her, and no car waiting at the curb. She stopped when she saw me. You came to see Mom? Yes. Thank you. That's between Margaret and me. She nodded. We walked in the same direction for a few yards. Harbor Ridge received final approval again, she said. The project is smaller now. The projected margin isn't what we wanted, but the risk is manageable. That sounds sustainable. Julian moved away. He still messages sometimes. I did not ask what the messages said. I don't answer, she added. I did not tell her that silence was wisdom or proof of change. That judgment belonged to her. At the path where the parking area split, she stopped. Are you happy now? I considered the question. I'm honest now. Is that more important than happiness? Honesty gives happiness a chance. She looked down at the grocery bag. I'm still learning. Then keep learning. We went in opposite directions. This time, she did not follow. A year after the divorce, Lydia and I signed a lease for a permanent office. There was no dramatic skyline outside the windows. Across the street stood a bakery and a bus stop. At noon, the smell of bread drifted through the lobby whenever someone opened the front door. I liked the ordinariness of it. Lydia placed a new client agreement on my desk and asked whether I planned to attend the celebration that evening. I'll be there. She raised an eyebrow. Without checking your email every 6 minutes? I can make no legally binding promise. Progress, she said. Near the end of the workday, Clara forwarded a final message from Evelyn's attorney. The last property payment had cleared. Evelyn had also executed a formal waiver of any potential marital claim against the advisory practice. The language was standard and complete. Beneath it, Evelyn had added a single sentence. Thank you for not destroying me. And thank you for finally stopping yourself from saving me. I read it twice before archiving the message. She was only half right. I had not destroyed her, but I had not left to help her grow, punish her, or create a lesson she would remember. I left to reclaim my time, dignity, and right to choose from a marriage that had continued long after mutual care became habit. After the celebration, I walked back to my apartment alone. A dark shop window caught my reflection at the corner. No wedding band, no driver waiting, no knot in my stomach while I wondered when someone else's meeting would end. I thought about the restaurant's glass door. That night, I believed I had lost 10 years. Later, I understood that I had lost only a future that had already stopped existing. What I carried away was the part of me that remained intact. Evelyn had believed that until she made a final choice. I was required to remain available. But the quietest departure in a marriage is rarely an act of spite. Sometimes it is what happens after one person has gathered every fact, asked every necessary question, and finally stops arguing with the answer. I did not win because Evelyn regretted losing me. I won nothing from her regret. I simply reached the point where I no longer needed it as proof that I had once deserved to be loved.